Hi, everybody. Welcome to TV Guide Live. I'm Alex Albin, managing editor for TVGuide.com. I'm joined today by one of our awesome editors, Sadie Guinness. How you doing, Sadie? You excited to talk about Big Brother today?
Oh, I can't wait.
Me too. I love it as of, well, let's say 3 hours ago. So this is going to be pretty exciting. For you guys, some huge stuff has happened on the show in the past 24 hours. Not just on the broadcast itself. There was a big show last night, but on the feeds overnight, some crazy stuff happened. So I'm going to put up a spoiler warning right now. If you don't want to know what happened, eventually it's going to end up in the show. If you haven't been monitoring Twitter, you may not have heard about it. So turn away, come back, watch this later. But for the rest of you, we're going to get into it throughout the show. We also want to get into your questions throughout the show. So hit us up at facebook.com/TVGuide or on Twitter, #TVGLive, and we'll get to them throughout the show. Answer all of your burning questions about Big Brother. But let's kick it off, Sadie, because there is so much to talk about, ever so much. But let's start with the broadcast because that happened last night. Some big stuff went down. First thing I want to talk about, Paulie. He's been you seem very enthused by Paulie, Sadie. He's been a very controversial figure, I think, this season. He showed up again in the jury house. What exactly went down?
It was amazing to watch, but also kind of painful. So Pauly basically was running the house for the majority of this season, but in recent weeks, he kind of blew up his own game with the way he treated the other women in the house. And he was behind basically all of the jury members' evictions. He was behind Z's, who was his basically like showman's, his almost girlfriend. He was behind Day's, and he was behind Bridget's. And so when he showed up in the jury house last night, he had to face all of these women who he belittled, who he used, and who he really said some offensive things about, and they did not let him off easy. It was kind of great, but Pauly did not really, he hasn't learned anything. He kept talking down to these girls and saying that, like, Bridget just wrote off all men's opinions and that's why she didn't like him, because that's in Pauly's mind, like, what a feminist is. So
this is something that I feel like has been popping up a lot with reality shows this season. Our own Liam Matthews has gone pretty deep on Chad over on The Bachelorette. Friend of mine, Shauna Murphy, over on Revelist, did a really deep dive into the misogyny issues going on Big Brother this season and past seasons. Do you think this is something that somebody like a Pauly can get past at this point?
No. I don't think so. I think that is basically why he got evicted, is he and Natalie had it out over the way he talked to her and saying she was as fake as the things on his chest. And when she called him out on it, he doubled down. And that was when all his former Alliance members kind of turned against him and was like, this is not a guy we want around. Like, we don't want to be associated with someone who treats women this way. So if he had, I don't want to live feed spoiler yet, but you know.
Yeah, let's save that.
I don't think there's any way. This is now his legacy. He is the sort of poster child for the misogyny on this season. And I'm glad that he can't escape that. Like, he should be held accountable for the way he treated the women in the house.
I agree. There's one guy that, at least to me, and this is from a cursory watching, but seems like a little bit nicer, maybe. Victor got eliminated. No, still terrible? Don't say that.
Here's the thing. I love Victor and Paul now, but when they first entered the house, they were the worst of the bunch. They said horribly sexist, racist, violent threats against the other house guests. But they've kind of toned down recently. So
is that the reason he got eliminated? Was it the same reason as Pauly, or was he off the show for a different reason?
Victor is a comp beast, and he's really been also like working on his social game. He's a huge threat, yet for some reason the house guests don't really see him that way. They were actually going after Paul this week. So when Paul took himself off the block, it all came down to James. He had one vote to decide if it was going to be Victor or Corey, and James felt as though like the Showmance alliance with like Jadalee and Nikori could work together better than Victor and Paul. So he decided to take out Victor when he had a clean shot, and Victor couldn't pull himself off the block anymore.
We talk about Game of Thrones a lot. I'm only slightly familiar with Big Brother. This seems a lot like Game of Thrones to me, just the way you're talking about it.
Yeah, it's really complicated. People like to sort of write off this show, but there's a lot of layers to it, which is what makes it so good to watch. Like, I had no idea who was going to go home last night because James kept flip-flopping between Victor and Corey, like right up until the live show.
Wow, that's crazy. All right, well, let's move on from the live show. Also for you guys, we want to keep getting your questions. Send them in facebook.com/TV Guide or on Twitter, #TVG Live, or you get to them later on in the show. But again, spoiler warning, stay away if you don't want to know what happened last night. I watched a little bit of this comp. This was insane. It seemed like a crazy Survivor-style endurance test. But what, for those who didn't watch it, exactly was happening?
This is a comp they've done many times before. It was a comp James actually won last season, where you stand up on a wall on a little ledge and the wall sort of angles down and you get pelted with fish and water. And last season, James was up there for 4 hours. So I was really prepared for last night to be a long night, but people started dropping almost immediately.
How long do you think you could do that for?
10 minutes.
10 minutes tops,
Yeah.
That's it?
No longer.
We do the show for about 15 minutes, and honestly, like, I'm almost falling off the desk by the end anyway. But 2 people jumped. They didn't. They eliminated themselves. They evicted themselves from the competition.
Well, I was just floored when I saw this because it was 2 of the jury members who were trying to compete for a place back in the house. It was Devon and Zakiya. And Z is not really a player. She's not a fighter. No one expected her to go out anything but first. But Day, she seemed like full of fire and like ready to come back. And so when Day and Z, like Thelma and Louise, did off this wall in, I think about like 10 minutes in, everyone was shocked and no one could really understand what was going through their head. The only thing I can think of is that Day saw Victor up there and she knew there was no way she was going to outlast him. Mm-hmm. He's crazy strong. Like I probably would have given up like after a minute if I was going up against him.
So they weighed standing up there and having their legs kill them for the next day versus just like calling it right there.
That's my theory, but I really hope in the finale someone takes takes Day to task over her decision to jump. Because like at least put up a little fight. Don't give it over that easy.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's somebody else that fell down. We were just talking about him a little bit. It kind of felt like he got his comeuppance slightly in this event. Do you feel that way with Pauly? No?
No.
He fell in some water. That's pretty embarrassing.
No, they've been put through much worse in these competitions. But I was nervous. I knew it was basically going to come down between Victor and Pauly as soon as Bridget fell. And I was just praying. The last thing anyone wants is Pauly back in the house. And so when he fell off that wall, it was the greatest moment because not only does that mean he doesn't get to compete for that $500,000, but it means Victor became the first person in Big Brother history to ever be evicted twice and return to the house.
That's crazy. I did a quick poll of the TV Guide staff to find out whether this is something that's ever happened in reality show history before. We're not 100% sure. Liam, again, who's our Bachelorette expert, brought up Nick Vial, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, who came back twice over the course of 2 seasons. Certainly Top Chef did their Last Chance Kitchen, which brought somebody back in the season itself. But to have somebody come back twice in 1 season is insane. Do you feel like this sets him up to win it all at this point?
I think he's earned it more than anyone at this point. I think it's really, for me, coming down to Paul or Victor. And since they're planning to take each other to the final 2, there's a good chance we might actually see them at the end. And Victor would get my vote. Like, the fact that he not only came back twice, but battled his way back, I think he won like 6 comps to be where he is now, not including like Power of Veto and HOH, just comps to get in the house. Which
at the very least, he's locked up some good speaking engagements afterwards and appearances and things like that because he's become a huge star, I think. Personality quirks aside. That said, Nicole, though, is the ultimate winner last night, right? You're very happy about that. I could read faces really well. You're livid. Okay, well, tell people exactly what happened because it was an interesting little twist.
Well, once again, James won this comp last year, so I fully expected him to be able to pull it through, but he bailed. He made a deal with Nicole. She used the whole guilt trip everyone uses during HOH comps. I just want a letter from my family. And he gave in. He said, all right, like, I'll do this for you. Like, you haven't gotten a letter from your family all summer. And he bailed. And I think this is going to come back to bite him. I think James might be going home this week.
Well, you have two choices for eviction, right, at this point?
Well, you nominate 2 people.
You nominate 2 people.
Yes.
All right. See, again, I'm a huge expert of the show. I know all the rules. But James and Michelle.
Yes.
Right? Who do you think's going home?
Well, if she does put up James and Michelle, I think Nicole's going to be gunning for Michelle because Michelle's going after her, but the rest of the house is going to vote out James, for like without a doubt. James is a way bigger threat than Michelle.
All right. Well, we'll have to see what happens. And for you guys, please keep staying tuned to the feeds, tvguide.com. We have a ridiculous amount of stuff you guys have been doing. Awesome, awesome work on Big Brother. So check back pretty much every day for coverage of that. But we want to get to your guys' questions. If you still got them, still send them in. Facebook.com/tvguide or on Twitter, #TVGLive. Let's get to a couple of them now. D on Facebook says, they must get rid of Victor/Paul out now or hand them the win. James is smart to give HOH up so he can protect himself next week. Do you agree?
I think I get that strategy. I think that's what James was going for, that if he gives it to Nicole, maybe she won't nominate him and Natalie, and then he can compete HOH next week. I don't think it's going to go that way. I think Paul and Victor are going to get in Nicole's ear and really push for James this week. And I think she's going to give in because she doesn't have a lot of other support in the house outside Corey.
And James is the guy who gave up for her, right?
Yes,
Oh,
but
that's
James
gonna be
is
so sad.
James is notorious for making deals in HOH comps and then putting up and evicting the people he made deals for.
See, I've thought about this a lot. I feel like my strategy, if I was ever on a reality show like that, would be to hide the entire time. Like, I know that's not a great strategy, but
That's called being a floater.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd be a floater. I'm super into that. Kim on Twitter asks, who do you think is going to get the care package?
I think it's going to be Victor. It's going to be Victor or Paul. It's the only other option is Corey, and I don't think anyone's going to vote for Corey. But I think after winning back into the house after getting evicted, I think Victor definitely has earned that care package, but it's not a very exciting one. All it gives him is $5,000 to bribe someone in the house. Which the only way I could see that being used is if Nicole wants to put up James and Michelle, he could be like, I'll give you $5,000 if you put up James and Natalie instead. Maybe she'll go with it, but to me, $5,000 isn't that much money to put $500,000 at risk.
Okay, no, that's true. I was going to say in general, I would do literally anything for $5,000. I'm selling myself very short this show. Jeff on Facebook asked, do you think the care package will help or worsen the recipients game this week? I think you touched on it a little bit.
It could worsen. You get the care package ahead of the nominations, and every other time it's been announced publicly. And so if the whole house is there and let's say Victor gets a care package that says you get $5,000 to bribe someone, if I was HOH, I would put him right on the block because otherwise that gives him a lot of power to sway other people into doing his bidding, and maybe I wouldn't want him around.
Here's another one I think you've touched on a little bit, but Courtney on Facebook asks, who deserves to be in the final 2? Which I think is different from who you think is going to be in the final 2.
I think James and Victor. I think, or not James and Victor, Paul and Victor. Neither one of them really knew a lot about Big Brother going into this, and I think they're playing currently better than anyone else in the house, including the 2 vets. Paul and Victor came up with this amazing strategy this week to keep Victor safe, and the strategy was they were going to fake fight. So that way they would think Victor was like alone in the house, and Paul started hanging out with Nicole and Corey very publicly. That way, like, hopefully, like, James and Natalie would see Corey as the threat because think, like, you know, that house had the majority. And I thought that was, like, the best game move we've seen all season. So, like, give them the money.
Cool. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Just a quick statement to throw it out there. Angie on Facebook says, yep, must get Victor and Paul out. So there you go, conversely to what you just said. But last question we have time for today. Tommy on Twitter asks, who do you think will win America's favorite?
Natalie.
Yeah?
She's my favorite. I would love to see her in the final 2. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think she's been playing a clean game. I think she's funny. I think people love her relationship with James, and I would love to see her get at least America's favorite player, if not the final 2.
All right, great. Sadie, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking time away from the CBS All Access feeds to come on the show and actually talk about Big Brother. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And thank you guys. We're here every weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, totally live, talking about different stuff with TV, answering your questions. So please hit us up with them any time of the week, facebook.com/TV Guide, or on Twitter, #TVG Live. The world of TV is very complicated. We'll guide you through it. See you next time.